one of the organisers. We're going to ask about why is this festival important with what's happening today?
So can you introduce yourself?
I'm Jason E. Bowman, and with all the words I'm the co-director of New Work Network. New Work Network is an organisation that was established 15 years ago in order to address barriers to sort of social and cultural and political confidence in transgressive forms of arts practice, so primarily performative and live art practice.
So is this sort of art practice new, or has it always been going on?
I think that the live art movement in the UK is derivations sit within a conceptual body art from the 60s onwards. So at the point in which artists were using their body in order to politicise questions around the commercialisation or purchasability of contemporary art. And that's kind of where I believe fundamentally our sort of roots lie.
Okay, can you give us some examples of some of the people who've been talking over the weekend?
Yeah, over the weekend there's been a variety of sort of people talking. In London in the 60s there was a movement called the Arts Lab movement, which then later disseminated and became a UK movement. We had two people yesterday talking, David Curtis and Biddy Pepin, who were involved in the original Arts Labs movements in London, talking about the way the Arts Labs were organised, how they facilitated themselves, aspects of idealism or utopianism, and fundamentally why the Arts Lab movement collapsed.
Okay, I'm really curious about the collapse because I'm currently involved in a member of what's called the Hack Lab, or Hack Space. It's called the Hack Space, yes, which is kind of it's exactly the same project as what they were doing in the 1960s, and it's utopian, it's beautiful, but it's got kind of the seeds of its own destruction built in. So I'm really curious how we can escape that destruction which they suffered from. So that kind of wisdom they have is very important for current generations. What did you get out of the talk? How could we possibly escape from this?
Well, I think there's another point to be made, which is, should these things be seeking permanence or sustainability, or are they forces of energy for a specific moment that are either there to be resistant, to challenge a status quo, to have a variety of different types of impacts as opposed to seek sort of sustainability. So I think there's a question around that anyway. Secondly, I think because Arts Lab was occurring at the point where public subsidy and public sector for that type of activity, which would seem to be highly avant-gardist and radical, didn't exist, was entirely dependent on the labour of unpaid people. Arts Lab had a very fast programme mentality, so they were actually conceiving of exhibitions weekly and sometimes every 2 weeks, and replacing their whole sort of programme. Distribution systems were very different, so their film programme was using physical print, as opposed to download and fast screen. And I think basically, Arts Lab died through the sheer exhaustion to some extent of the people who were working there.
Right. What next for this ad hocracy festival? What would you think it needs to do? How should it manifest next time, do you feel?
I think again, we need to take the temperature of what is the moment at which to sort of produce another autocracy festival, and what it will seek to do in terms of what is happening at that moment. Obviously, we're in London. It's 2011. Next year will bring us the Olympics. We look, for example, at the situation of the supposed artistic or cultural regeneration of Hackney Wick. For example, the Hackney Wick Festival was last weekend, which was attended by almost 30,000 people across what ostensibly must be around 2 square miles of cultural activity. But within the Olympic regeneration, will Hackney Wick continue to be a space of DIY, culture? And I think there are questions like that living in London that it will be our responsibility post this autocracy to consider within another.
Right. I was just come from Dawson, and there's the carnival going on, and it is so heavily policed by community policing and official policing. And you look at the Hackney Wick, there's not a policeman in sight, and the Hackney Wick is vibrant and full of life and creativity and weirdness, and the Dawson carnival is controlled and it's contained, and it's safe in that horrible word as in boring and bland. So I agree. Will these spaces still exist?
Yeah, I think that I live in Dawson, And I think there's a set of things to take on board there. Hackney Wick was last weekend. We've just experienced on Saturday a series of significant riots in Tottenham following the assassination of a young 29-year-old male by police. The Dawson Festival takes place immediately after that this weekend. There are literally, what is it, 3 miles between those two geographies, so maybe that explains aspects of this increased policing around the Dawson festival as a situation. I think Dawson is also a much more multicultural space than I observed Hackney Wick to be last weekend. So we usually find in spaces where there is a more diverse populace, there is higher levels of police attendance at such events.
Okay, so back to the subject of this festival and how people can get involved if they want to get involved in helping out, making it happen. Have you got a contact or a web address?
Yeah, you can contact us via the Autocracy website, but otherwise you can email us at info@newworknetwork.org.uk.
All right, thank you very much.
Let's see what other interesting people we find today at the Adhocracy Festival.